I've server muted him. All right, guys. I think we can get started. So the purpose of today's community call is to provide a forum to discuss upcoming SIPs and also SIP proposals. We have two SIPs planned to go live after this call. The first is a SIP which has been discussed quite extensively, which is the introduction of SOV rewards to SOV stakers. The second is the transfer of SOV from the adoption fund to the Bob time lock. What I'll do is I'll provide a little bit of context and answer some of the questions that I've already seen on both of these, and then we can open up to discussion on these topics, and then later on any additional SIPs that people would like to discuss or SIP proposals. So, starting with the Bob Spice campaign. A little bit of context here might be helpful. As you guys may or may not be aware, the current sort of marketing meta in crypto, and particularly as it comes to the launch of new rollups, is the introduction of points programs. This started, I think, with Blast, but has been significant with Manta and Merlin and a large number of other projects. These points programs are effectively a sort of way of getting to participate in what ultimately becomes an airdrop of the token. Bob are doing something similar with what they're calling the Spice campaign, and I think the first part of the Spice campaign is called Spice Fusion, and is a time lock contract that they've created, which allows people prior to the launch of Bob main chain to start depositing funds, which are then to be moved into Bob, and this will allow Bob to demonstrate and have initial liquidity. Now, I think it goes without saying that that kind of liquidity is extremely important to Sovereign with the launch of a DEX. DEXs live or die on the available liquidity. But before we get into the specifics of how this directly benefits Sovereign, I think it's worth saying some words on how this benefits Bob. So Bob need to establish themselves in the market. They need to establish themselves as a significant player. And of course, that means creating FOMO, creating hype. That is the primary goal of airdrops and particularly of point programs. Now, what we would like to see is we would like to see Bob succeed, because success for Bob means that we have the opportunity to be the largest DeFi suite and the largest DEX on a significant chain rather than an insignificant chain. And one of the ways that we can assist Bob in succeeding is to have a significant amount of funds going into the pool. This is, if nothing else, merely the ability to put out tweets or put out articles saying, look how much money people have already moved to Bob. It must be a very, very big and important launch, and that causes additional excitement, which is likely to drive additional interest in trading and providing liquidity to the sovereign DEX. In addition to that, there's also Sovereign's traditional approach, which is that we've always sought to go above and beyond with... Guys, if you can please mute yourselves, and CMs, if you could server mute. What we've always sought to do is go above and beyond. I think we've definitely demonstrated this in our relationship with the Rootstock chain and IOV Labs, where we have contributed huge amounts and effectively built out the ecosystem that exists on Rootstock. We would like to be known as good partners. We want Sovereign to be attractive to users, but we also want Sovereign to be attractive to other partners, and particularly Bitcoin-focused chains that are launching. Sovereign should be the first partner that they think of. And so we want to have a reputation of being good partners and partners who move the needle. Whether or not this will be reciprocated by Bob is too soon to tell, but I think it is important that we establish ourselves in that way. Okay, so we therefore, by moving significant funds into the Bob time lock are able to demonstrate that we're good partners, are able to help create strong headline numbers, but we also are effectively mining Bob points. So why is this important, and what can we do with these Bob points? Our goal is for us to be the largest DEX in Bitcoin and the largest DEX in any chain that we launch on. And that includes Bob. And so we want to make sure that we have a large number of assets and the deepest liquidity, and are bringing in and exposing ourselves to as many new users as possible. To do this, we want at every stage to be a significant player. And so in the early stage, we want Sovereign to be a significant player. We want people to see that a lot of SOV is part of the pool. This will introduce many people to SOV as a token and Sovereign as a project. And we also have introduced a points on points program where we will allow people to deposit into the Bob time lock via Sovereign and get a very significant, a 50% bonus on their Bob points. Now, where are these Bob points going to come from? The way that we get the Bob points to distribute and to provide this bonus is by mining Bob points ourselves. Why would we want to do this? Well, the more of this liquidity that we can lock up and acquire as LP liquidity means that when Bob launches, the day that Bob launches, the bigger Sovereign will be in terms of TVL, in terms of asset traded, and also in depth of liquidity, which means that it'll be attractive to trade on Sovereign, and it will be attractive to be an LP on Sovereign. And so we can really establish ourselves. And I'm sure you guys have noticed that in crypto, there is a very, very persistent first mover advantage. Bitcoin is the epitome of first mover advantage. Not the most features, but first chain. Ethereum, first smart contract chain, still the biggest. Tether, first stablecoin, still the biggest. WBTC, first way to get Bitcoin onto Ethereum, still the biggest. MetaMask, first wallet, still the biggest. Uniswap, actually was not the first, but was the second, still the biggest. And so there's a very, very strong first mover advantage in crypto, and we want to take advantage of that. Beyond that, all of the main pairs on Sovereign DEX on Bob are going to be paired with SOV. This is something new that we're experimenting with and we think can be extremely valuable. It will create a whole new source of demand and utility for SOV. And what that means is that the bigger the DEX is on Bob, the more demand there will be for SOV. But moreover, the more people who participate right now in bringing assets to LP means more SOV purchases. And so, even in the days running up to the launch, we are hoping to see, and in fact expecting to see, significant interest in purchasing SOV as part of and significant purchases of SOV as part of our points on points program. And so this can be very strong for the SOV token value, but even beyond the headline value that it provides, the most important thing, right? The strongest type of marketing in crypto is green candles, and if we can, do anything we can during a bull market to induce green candles on SOV is a benefit to Sovereign. Finally, and this is perhaps the most important point, in order to generate significant liquidity on a DEX, and we've experienced this ourselves on Rootstock. We've been providing significant SOV rewards, right? Yield farmers go and look for these rewards. And we've managed over time to reduce the amount of rewards very, very significantly on Rootstock. But starting on a totally new chain, we would need to offer very big rewards. Doing this in SOV will mean a huge introduction of new liquid SOV onto the market. This is something we want to avoid. And so by replacing the SOV rewards with Bob rewards, we can achieve all of the upside that I've just discussed at effectively no cost to our treasury. So this is not costless. The cost as it exists is primarily in the risks that we are taking. So what are the risks that we are taking, and how should we think about these risks? So the obvious risk is that something goes wrong with the time lock contract, or something else goes wrong in transit, and SOV, perhaps as part of a larger, a very large assortment of assets, gets stolen. This would not be good. It could mean that ESOV gets sold onto the market, which could precipitate a significant drop in the SOV price. However, my view is that in all likelihood, even if that were to happen, the worst case scenario were to happen, it could prove to be advantageous for us. First of all, there's not that much ESOV liquidity, and so any sharp drop in ESOV would soon be arbed away. Second, because the ESOV is bridged, and bridged through a bridge that we control, we have the ability, which we've never used, but in an extremely dramatic scenario would use, we have the ability to freeze those funds so that they can never be redeemed for the SOV on rootstock. And so this can allow us to protect those funds, or we could even choose to burn those funds if we so desired, which from a marketing perspective could be powerful. That wouldn't be our first recourse, but it is an option that we have in our back pocket. All right, so that's one side of the risk. What is the other side of the risk? In my view, the other side of the risk is twofold. First of all, we already know what the experience of building on rootstock is. We've built a very significant, very performant, top-class suite of DeFi applications, but we have limited audience. The real risk, in my view, is that we don't expand our market, and this could happen in one of two ways. Either Bob fails, which we're trying to do what we can to make sure that doesn't happen, or that we don't become a significant player in Bob. The goal here is to avoid or mitigate the chance of either of those two things happening. And then finally, in terms of how we should be thinking about risk. As a community and as a project, we have been very conservative. And this type of activity is very not conservative. It's fast. Because it came together quickly, there was only the opportunity to introduce it last Friday. It's quite degen. It's not what we would sort of typically have done as part of sovereign culture. However, we are not in a bear market anymore, and we are not building an alpha system in a Bitcoin sort of incubated rootstock environment anymore. We are now trying to play to win with the big boys. And that means we need to be in a bull market, aggressive, attractive, interesting, fun. And I think the bigger risk here is that we culturally do not adapt to the fact that we are now in a bull market and we have a big market opportunity and we should go after it with maximal aggression. One final question, and this brings me to the second SIP, SOV rewards. How do SOV holders benefit from this? I mean, sorry, not SOV holders, SOV stakers on rootstock. First of all, as holders of SOV, as stakers of SOV, you are sitting on an asset. It is best for this asset to be part of a successful project and as a result see an increase in value. That is to all stakers and all SOV holders benefit. Second, SOV stakers, it looks like we're being spammed here. I'd like to ask the CMs, can you please be on this faster than me, so that I don't need to interrupt my speech? Okay, so what we proposed and have significantly debated the introduction of SOV-denominated rewards to SOV stakers and rootstock. A big part of this is because we foresaw a situation where this is exactly what I was talking about in terms of maintaining aligned incentives. We want to make sure that any benefits that accrues to sovereign anywhere, not just on rootstock, will be translated into a direct benefit to SOV stakers in the form of additional SOV with increasing value. And then finally, there has been no decision made around how fees earned by sovereign on Bob will be dealt with. And there is a discussion to be had about whether or not they should be in some form transported to SOV stakers on rootstock. I'm not sure I'm in favor. I've seen arguments on both sides and haven't thought about this deeply enough. But in any event, the value accrued initially is going to go to the sovereign treasury and be held there in escrow until any further decision is made. And so overall, this value, to the extent that value is accrued, will be accruing to all of Sovereign, and of course Sovereign's owners are the SOV stakers. And so that also helps explain why the reasoning behind the second SIP, which is the introduction of SOV rewards to SOV stakers. And so with that, I think there's enough context and background, and I'd like to open it up to conversation. I see people are typing. Hold on. Let me try and open that up. Okay, so TM is asking, does SOV binded pools mean that BTC USD would actually go BTC SOV USD? What it means is that USD would be paired against SOV, BTC would be paired against SOV, and yes, to go through BTC to USD, you would trade via the two, but basically through SOV. Jimmy Shaker asks, why would you not be in favor of spreading a share to SOV stakers? They've been the backbone of the project. I'm not sure I understand, Jimmy, what you're referring to. A share of what? And bear in mind, I am an SOV staker as well, so we're in the same boat. Capitalist42 is writing, also, I see that on the call are a few people who have been engaged in this debate in the forum. So, for example, Lactarius is here, and I think you have been opposed. I would be very happy to provide you with an opportunity to present your views. Okay, so Spro says, question from SIP-79. What are the benefits to RSK stakers directly from the big gamble on our reputation and funds, besides marketing for Bob and token price appreciation, which RSK stakers don't directly benefit from? Will there be any airdrops of Spice for stakers or any other direct benefits? At this point in time, there is no plan to airdrop Spice points to SOV stakers. I don't know how much I can say about this. Bob have some plan to reward SOV stakers, but I don't have confirmation on it. But I think the biggest benefit of the three benefits that I pointed out at the end, additional revenue for Sovereign, SOV rewards for stakers, and accrual of value to SOV. Lactarius is asking why not use the 9,000 SOV that you've already received from Bitocracy. Our plan is to indeed use that 9,000, which would mean a transfer of up to 23 million SOV to Bob. Sorry. Yes, I think it's about 23 million. The reason being What we want to do is we want to accrue as many points as possible, and we want to have as large a headline number as possible. And we consider the risk manageable. And the reason we want to accrue the points is because we will be using them over time in the way that I have described. So, yes, that it's basically those two things. We want a large headline number, and we want to be able to accrue as many points as necessary. SIP-79 asks further, who exactly has the keys to the funds when they are locked up? Has our security team vetted the contract code? Our team have indeed vetted the time lock, as well as an independent audit party. As for the multisig, the holders of the multisig keys will effectively be the holders of the sovereign bridge, which has been working without incident for 3 years now, and that will also allow us to mitigate any and respond in a timely manner to any incident that does arise, were any incident to arise. Jimmy Shaker asks, why would you not be in favor of spreading a share of Bob rewards to SFV stakers? They have been the backbone of the project. I'm not opposed. The current plan only goes so far as providing 50% bonus points to those who come through the time lock, who deposit into the time lock via Sovereign. Any further decisions on that, on any additional SOV that, any additional spice points that are accrued can be made at a later stage. In my view, it is more valuable, in part because I actually think the points are perceived as more valuable than they actually are, but especially by people on Bob. In my view, it is more valuable to use them to drive liquidity, but like everything else Exchequer does, it's a question of trying to find the optimal mix. Capitalist42 asks, what is the total amount that the team is going to transfer to Bob Timelock? About 24 million SOV, any other tokens BTC. So we would anticipate, yes, transferring about 22 million SOV, if I'm not mistaken. Some Bitcoin, in order to provide liquidity for fast BTC, and some ESOV in order to provide liquidity to the AMM in the form of ESOV, so that we can grow sovereign dollar, so that we can grow an entirely new market for the sovereign dollar and grow sovereign dollar's market cap. Lactarius asks, is it possible to quantify the rewards obtained during these 21 days? Is it a defined amount of spice? Do we know the expected equivalent value in dollars? No, we do not know the equivalent value in dollars because spice will not be traded and so won't have a price. But we would anticipate for every dollar held per day to earn 1 spice point. What that actually means in terms of economic value is too early to assess. For us, the primary economic value is driving LPs to deposit, sort of pre-deposit funds into the sovereign DEX. Jimmy Shaker asks, would it be possible to transfer SOV directly to Bob, or does it have to be ESOV? No, we will be transferring everything directly, not directly, but via the bridge, which means that it will be going to Ethereum first, which means it will be ESOV, no sort of rootstock SOV in its unwrapped form. TM asks, do you see the need of improved communication, especially around rushed SIPs, proposed Friday, vote Monday, as well as plans in general? As a staker, we've been taught and trained to think and evaluate for some time in the future. This basically goes very diametrically. I think you mean diametrically opposed to this. Communication is a major criticism since the very beginning. Well, here we're communicating. We communicate on the forum. I have seen people argue that we're not communicating or that there isn't communication. Yourself and Lactarius are 2 examples of that. And frankly, I don't know what to make of that. I will write to someone, and then in their reply they will say that I'm ignoring them. I'd be happy to know what information or what form of communication people are expecting that is not being provided. I think there's a very significant effort to provide open channels of communication. So TM, if you want to explain in greater detail what's missing, happy to hear. Redemption 944 asks, when is the issue concerning vesting withdrawal to be resolved? My funds are stuck in the vesting contract. I will defer this question to the end and then provide an opportunity for Amanda to respond if we have time. The primary purpose of this community call is to discuss SIPs and SIP proposals, but if we have time, redemption will come back to your question. Lactaria says, this AMA, for example. I think that's what he means. Okay, Lactarius. First of all, you're free to speak. Everyone is.
I believe Lactarius is referring to Tom's comment. But Tom, you are also, if you wish, you're also free to speak.
Jimmy Shaker asks, what will be the best solution to add liquid SOV to Bob for individual users? You can just bridge SOV to Ethereum and deposit it into the time lock, or just bridge it to Bob once Bob launches. So anyone who has liquid SOV can participate and earn spice points, for example. I see a number of people are typing questions. And there's a little bit of a race going on as whose question will come out first. Or comment. Doesn't have to be a question, it can be a comment. Can be an argument. And also don't forget, we have the opportunity here for anyone who wishes to speak. In fact, I would encourage it because it's much faster as a process. Jimmy Shaker asks, am I content with MXC's first days? To be frank, I personally didn't anticipate a huge amount of action on MXC, and I haven't actually looked at the exchange or its volume since the launch. I've been fully engaged in the spice, the SIPs, and all a whole bunch of other work, and so I haven't really engaged with that. So I don't have a good answer for you. Lactarius asks, in relation to my request for better communications and more transparency, this AMA actually solves it. Oh, well, that's good to hear. I'm glad, Lactarius. Futo Kuko asks, what would be the incentive for SOV stakers on Rootstock to stay on Rootstock if there are more rewards and incentives with SOV on Bob? Well, there aren't. There are, if anything, less rewards for SOV stakers on Bob. And this will certainly be true with the introduction of SOV rewards, assuming that SIP passes. So the incentive to stake on Rootstock is it is the most profitable place to stake, or at least of equivalent profitability to staking on Bob. TM says, on the point of communication, either it's just me, but I guess I'm not the only one, for at least 1 year or longer, the impression things are fuddled out behind the scenes, swiftly presented and voted if it's a core proposal, openly admitting that things took considerable time to discuss internally, yet communication is very much surprised when change of directions are announced and already on track. I believe community input is a great value to have until a vote shall decide. And then he apologizes for not speaking. He says he has a cold. I think that certainly happens, and we certainly do sometimes have SIPs which have relatively short periods of time. But even those usually have several days, if not close to a week, for debate and discussion. And usually that's not the case. So, for example, the second SIP, which is going to vote, was proposed initially. I don't know. February 5th, so close to 2 months ago, and has over 91 comments in the forum. And I think that is actually more typical of significant SIPs. Now, I'd like to address the feeling that you have, TM, that things are done in the background without sort of your input. And I think that that's totally true. There's a lot of things that happen and are being developed or designed or, created by the communications team in Sovereign. That is work that is ongoing. And there is not a single person in the world who has visibility over all of it, including myself. There's just too much happening. But obviously the people who are engaged on a day-to-day basis and are actively involved, they see it, and nothing is a surprise, or not nothing, but fewer things are surprising to them. To people who are engaged, in other ways, on Telegram or by using the DApp, then there's simply going to be less visibility. And I don't think there's anything that we can reasonably expect to do to change that. So this feeling that there's stuff going on that you don't see and don't have visibility is factual. There's that's just the reality of having a large number of people coordinating. We've tried in various ways, like keeping the discussion groups open on Discord and trying to have as much of the conversation in public as possible. But in practice, over time, it's been the case that it's proven difficult to, or impractical, I should say, to actually do that. So, for example, the adoption team who are working on partnerships, communicating with third parties, preparing surprises, and doing things where frequently, the ability to sort of come out of the blue with a cool communication is key. They have created a number of channels where they can discuss these things without it being publicly visible. The development team are devs, and while we've tried to encourage devs and all dev communication to happen on public channels, in practice, devs are typically introverts and shy, and what we found was that in practice, this led to less communication rather than more public communication. And so we've also found that the devs then will go and sort of create their own channels and discuss things there. Trying to fight that is like trying to fight human nature, and I think is pointless. So, are there things that we can do to increase communication and transparency for all participants, not including myself? Surely there are. Are they going to happen in a bull market? Almost certainly not. Lactarius says, returning to the unlikely scenario of loss that you mentioned, that ESOV couldn't be redeemed for SOV. Can temporary insurance be contracted for 21 days? I don't know the answer to that. My guess is probably not, but if someone can investigate that, it might be worth considering. TM says it's...
Sorry, I've looked into it very briefly. I think potential option is Hedera provide insurance for similar use cases. I'm not sure we'll be able to contract ad hoc insurance for an activity like this. But if anyone knows of insurance providers in the DeFi space, Web3 space, who could be potential providers of such insurance, please let me know.
Thank you, Armando. TM says, in response to what I was responding to him about communication, it's difficult, I agree, but you're such a great spokesperson. Community for sure would like to see more what's going on, directions, and finding trust to stake for 3 years. I'm sure that's true. I'm not sure, however, that greater transparency would increase trust. You don't trust sausages more because you see how they're made. You, if anything, went to the sausage factory, you trust it less. And I think, as someone who has been working on Sovereign for a long time now, I have experienced this a lot. I think we've, as a project, as a team, as a community, kept ourselves to the highest standards of ethics. And we've delivered on the things that we said. We've continuously developed. Basically, the same team that we're here on day one are here still. There's a level of commitment from the community and from the core team that is unusual, and that I think should have built a reputation and a relationship of trust. In practice, I think a lot of the people who are attracted to Sovereign are people who don't have a lot of trust. That's sort of why they're attracted to Sovereign. They don't trust anything. And the number of times that it's been insinuated that I or other people on the team am, scamming or ignoring the community or trying to do some kind of rug pull or have some kind of other conspiracy theory. It's basically a daily occurrence on some of the forums. Even when we proposed this most recent SIP, most projects just have a treasury and they can do whatever they want with the treasury. We set up Sovereign so that we have to ask the community for everything. We have to ask specifically Bitocracy. And every time a request or a change or something is requested of Bitocracy, there is some degree of controversy, because change is always controversial. My view is that in practice, debate, controversy, transparency, they do not create trust. They do exactly the opposite in terms of feelings. They create high trust environments from an operational and an institutional perspective, but from the way people feel, they make people think that there's some hanky-panky going on. And I think that that's probably true of all institutional systems. I think probably people in China trust their government more than the people in the United States do, even though that is obviously absurd. You said Spice will not be traded, and 1 Spice will be issued per day per locked dollar. Is there no max supply for Spice then? Jimmy, to be honest, I don't know. These are decisions that will be taken by Bob, and we don't have full visibility into it. And I think they are purposefully keeping some degree of opacity or mystery, both from marketing perspectives and to provide themselves with flexibility. What's important to us is the ability to attract enough Spice that we can offer 50% bonus to people who are providing LP, and potentially have some left over for additional awards down the line. Sepp asks, can you explain what the power projections are? Is it just an NFT? So, this is also not a question with regards to SIPs, but I think it's an easy one to answer, so I'll answer it quickly. Power is going to be a a fungible token, not an NFT, and it's going to be a rune token. It will be one of the first runes tokens which are created, and one of the first which are tradable. And you can think of it sort of as the meme token for Sovereign on Rootstock, which is also another thing which has become very popular, is having sort of like a meme token on every chain. But I think that there's a very good possibility that additional utility and value will accrue to power over time. But that remains to be seen. David asks, I just bridged USDT to Rootstock and I have to pay a 5% fee. Is that correct? I don't think you have to pay a 5% fee. I think it's very much... I think you should ask in one of the forums, and then community managers, David, can look into your specific transaction. But you actually shouldn't have had to pay a 5% fee. That seems very unusual to me. And in fact, if you're bridging, depending on how you're bridging, but if you bring USDT, for example, into Babelfish, you should make money, not lose money. Lactario says, there isn't going to be a special direct bridge between Sovereign and Bob. Is that correct? Not at this time. At this time, we will rely on the Ethereum bridge. It's well understood. It's established. And it's not additional work to create. Perhaps at a future point, we would introduce a direct to Bob bridge. There is some complexity around that, which we haven't had time or inclination to deal with. Luca says, apart from Iago's answer, you have a lot more info here. Oh, that's about PowerPoints. David says, RBTC paid. Maybe I bridged too big an amount. The amount of RBTC you pay in a transaction is not related to how much value you transferred. So I find this very, very strange. David, I suggest you either ask the CMs, or if you go to the dApp at the lower left corner, you will find a little button that you can press, which will allow you to communicate directly with the team and create a ticket. Capitalist42 is typing. Will Sovereign offer SOV rewards to attract LP in the Bob chain in the future? That may be. Currently, there is no such plan. And that will ultimately be a decision for Exchequer to make. I would like to avoid it. I would like to get us to a point with DEX 2.0 on Bob that it is self-sustaining with very little or possibly, ideally, no input of SOV rewards. Traveler and Capitalist42 are writing, and so I will use this as an opportunity to come back to redemption's question. When will the issue concerning vesting withdrawal be resolved? I, to be honest, am not the most up-to-date on this particular question. Overall, I believe that everyone has been compensated, and most of the issues have been fixed, but some of the issues cannot be fixed, and that's why some compensation was provided. And the only way we can fix them is by upgrading Rootstock itself, which there is some plan to do. But Armando, do you have additional information on this?
Sorry, I was answering David in the chat. Could you repeat the question? Iago?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, Redemption says, when is the issue concerning vesting withdrawal to be resolved? My funds are stuck in the vesting contract.
Oh, so the issue there is the gas fee limit on RSK. So we're looking to solve this issue in two different ways. One, to see with the Rootstock team how we can raise the gas fee limit. There seems to be the ability to raise it a certain amount, which should allow us to unlock a number of those funds. To get them to raise the gas limit, which will allow all of those locked SOV to be released, is going to be more challenging. Once we understand from them what our options are, we can make a decision. That decision will either be to release SOV, additional SOV to all of the users who have stuck SOV, or depending on when this resolution will happen, provide some other value in lieu of those stuck SOV. It could be SOV on the sovereign layer, but we don't know. So basically, the status right now is we're trying to work with the rootstock team to up the gas limit to release all of those SOV. We should know more towards the end of this week, and what I will do, I don't know if we have a forum post that is discussing this issue, but I'll open a forum post towards the end of the week this week when we have more information, and we'll just put updates there onto how this is being solved.
Thank you, Armando. I'm going to continue with questions. Traveler asks, what's stopping fish from being added as collateral for loans? Mostly the volatility of fish. Collateral of any kind added is effectively risk taken on by all lenders. And so there's fairly high requirements in terms of the stability, longevity, and volatility acceptable for any collateral type. Capitalist42 asks, how is the new DEX code base going, ready for mainnet launch? Yes, effectively the new, unless I'm mistaken, I believe that it's already been deployed into Bob testnet and will be ready for mainnet. So when mainnet launches, it should automatically be deployed, not automatically, but should be immediately deployed to mainnet. There remain aspects of QA testing and front-end development which are still in the works, but we have a high degree of confidence that it'll be ready. Lactarius asks, will it be possible to trade fish on Bob and Bob on Sovereign? Yeah, I don't see why not. We would need to bridge fish, but other than that, I don't see any reason why not. As for Bob trading on Sovereign, well, Bob hasn't even launched their token. I don't know if it's going to be called Bob. But yeah, we would like to see it traded significantly on Sovereign. Spro says there's an ongoing problem with the RPC nodes. Our devs are talking to Rootstock to solve it. Redemption says, thank you, I appreciate the answers. David is in a semi-private conversation. All right. The questions have veered away from the SIPs. So it seems that we have satisfied most of the conversation and questions about SIPs. I'll take a couple of more questions on other topics. So for example, Traveler asks, what happened to Sovereign Bank? Sovereign Bank was a project being led by a few people, Anders in particular. They were seeking to raise funds in the bear market and didn't manage to raise the amount of funds that they wanted. And so it never fully got off the ground. I recently heard, last week actually, so very recently, that now that the bull market is here, there is an effort to raise funds and sort of reignite the project, but I don't know much more than that. All right, I'll give another 30 seconds, and questions that are written in those 30 seconds we will answer, and otherwise I hope this has been valuable AMA, less of a conversation, more of an AMA, and a reminder that in 10 minutes the voting, or roughly 10 minutes, the voting should go live on both of these SIPs. Jimmy Shaker says, does your pal Alexei work on new on and off ramps? I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean, are they working? Is Bob working to have bridges? I think they are. sorry, Jimmy, I'm not sure what you're asking. Traveler says, thanks for clarifying issues, voting yes on all SIPs. And Jimmy Shaker says on Bob. Yeah, I'm sure they want to have as many on and off ramps on Bob as possible. For all of the different assets. We are hoping to make sure that we can have our fast BTC integrated so that we can have the same seamless experience in Bob, that users can have the same seamless experience in Bob that they have on Rootstock. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, sovereigns, boys and girls, thank you all very much for joining. Thank you for the conversation.
Quite a turnout for an AMA that wasn't even published on Twitter, just on our more tighter community channels. So it's great to see such a big turnout. I saw almost 50 at the peak here, and it's very nice to be a part of such an active and caring community.
Absolutely. So I hope in the future, fewer conspiracy theories will be attached to the core team. Eventually, hopefully, the reputation will be solid. And in the meantime, I need to tell everyone a secret word. And I can tell you guys that secret words are spicy. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all. Stay sovereign and to the moon.
Thank you.